Welcome, my friends. Welcome to my world. I'm your host, Kevin Rutherford. We are going to open the phone lines. It is the Power Hour today. We've got Pete and Ethan with us here. We haven't heard from Bruce yet. Bruce seems to be missing in action today. The number to join us, we're going to open those phone lines right now. You want to jump in as soon as possible. 855-950-3835. 855-950-3835. All right. We have got a lot going on today. One, my voice is still kind of shot. So after the truck show, thinking back now, it probably was not a good idea for me to make so many major changes all at once. Like, I got out on the road. There was a lot going on, obviously, getting the new show up and running, all the new technology, the travel, then the truck show. It was probably not a good idea to stop all of my supplements and change so many things. And then be at a truck show with thousands of people shaking hands, hugging, talking all day long. I have not been sick in 8 years, but boy, did I get it this time. It's not COVID either. I've tested twice. I thought for sure it was. When I started to get sick, it started with the sore throat, though. I didn't have many of the symptoms, although I saw a new list of symptoms for COVID, and it lists just about everything you might get if you had the cold or the flu, except the weird taste and smell thing. And I didn't lose my taste or smell. Mine seems to be all in my chest. A lot of congestion, a cough, my throat's sore, my voice doesn't hold out very well. After not being sick for 8 years, this is just kicking my ass. This was not pleasant at all, and I'm going on day 5. Each day I feel a little better, but I'm nowhere near 100%. Now, on top of all that, I have a totally new setup here. I took all of my equipment out of the coach, moved it into Pittsburgh Power this morning, and set them up as hosts, so they'll be able to start doing their own shows here soon, this week, I think, if we get a couple things taken care of. So I've got a whole new audio setup out here. Pete and Ethan are in the building. They have a whole new setup in there. We're not sure where Bruce is yet today, but hopefully this all works, and hopefully my voice holds out. I can feel it. I can feel it starting to get a little iffy right now. So why don't we do this before I end up talking too much? Why don't we just bring in Pete first? Pete, are you with us?
I am, Kevin.
Oh, boy, sounds like we're sitting right next to each other.
It does.
We're almost sitting right next to each other. I'm just outside of the building.
Pretty close.
Yeah, but it really good sound. I like the sound of your mic. So while I've got you, why don't you jump in and give us an update? What's going on this week?
Okay, busy. We've been fortunate. We've stayed busy as long as we have. And of course, we were at the truck show, which was busy, which we come back and it's even busier, which is the whole idea of doing the truck show. And, it was definitely a good show last 2 weeks ago when they had it. And it was nice to be able to get out and do it as well. We haven't had a big truck show for a couple of years, so that was definitely good. And you're talking about how many people. There's a little over 50,000 people there.
Boy, that's actually low.
Normally, it is. So normally it's 80s. Now, all the show people count the numbers differently. So that is registered attendees. So if your wife and kids and brother and his wife sign up and only one of you show, they count everyone who's registered.
Oh.
All the shows.
Oh,
and I found that by mistake. One of the other shows sent me numbers. I'm like, wait a second, how do we go from 40,000 people to 18,000?
Right.
And I called them like, oh, well, you weren't to get those numbers. What we see as exhibitors is registered attendees.
Got it.
So everyone that signs up online is counted, whether you're through the door or not. So the number that goes through your door is for people to see internally. So there's never as many people there as they say. But with that said, I think the lesser crowd was better. It doesn't matter if there's 150,000 people there. If they can't get to your booth, what's the purpose of them being there?
Yeah, it seems to me like I remember weren't there years they exceeded 70,000 registered?
Oh, 80s.
80,
yes.
Okay. Yeah,
In the 80s, low 80s for quite a few years.
We've always said something about the booth that you can't tell the difference in the Pittsburgh Power booth. It doesn't matter what the numbers are. The booth just seems to be busy the whole show. Even
when we had the turn down, 7 or 8 years ago, when a lot of the big companies pulled out, the crowds were down, but we were just as busy.
I remember.
So it hasn't.
Yeah, I remember that you're talking, I wandering around the show, talking to our vendors that were in other places, not over in that area that we have. And most of the vendors were talking to each other. It wasn't a really busy show that year at all. And everybody noticed it, except every time I would get back to our area, it just felt like a normal year. There was just always people there.
Yeah, we're fortunate we stay busy at this show. But how many shows do you get to go to where there's people like us there and not just a salesperson there? I mean, you got, Bruce, the owner of the company, and he's working the show. You come to our booth. You don't get that a lot of places.
That's a good point.
You get someone and they know what they're told to know. Bruce and I both have, worked on trucks from the beginning. We both did injectors, fuel pumps, rebuilds. So, you're talking to someone that knows the business, not just a salesperson that's trying to promote something. You don't get that, I think, in most booths. They don't have that.
Yeah, you're right. If you think about the people attending the show, if you are interested in something and you go to the booth, you probably want to know what it's all about, the price, what it does, all that stuff. And once they tell you that, maybe you buy something if they have something to sell. Maybe you take a card and figure you go look it up later. But the Pittsburgh Power booth, it's almost like an extension of this show and the same thing you guys do on the phone every day. People come and they have questions. They want to ask questions. They want things explained. They want to show you oil samples. They want to tell you about when their truck broke down and it's been in 7 shops and nobody's been able to fix it. And we usually end up, when I'm there, I say we, with a line. Sometimes it's difficult. You've got, 4 or 5 or 6 people waiting to talk, and you try to balance it with how much time can I spend with each person. And then you notice people in the back of the line actually start leaving sometimes because they're waiting too long. So the good thing about the booth, though, at Pittsburgh Power is there's a lot of people that can answer questions. And I think that's why the booth, it just feels that busy all the time.
Yeah, so in the past, we've always had, someone from the engineering department. So this year is Leroy. We've had JR there. We've had Ethan there. So when there's a question with, hey, I got a code or a program issue, we've got someone that can answer it with the knowledge and not just, a pre-written speech they can give them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like you say, a lot of times for a lot of companies, they send salespeople and it's an opportunity to make sales. The people who are buying stuff in the Pittsburgh Power booth knew they already wanted it. They'd come in and say, do you have this? Do you have this? Did you bring this? So they're either there to just buy something and maybe get the show special or save on shipping, or they're there to ask a question. I don't, not in the booth all the time. This show I was there quite a bit, but nobody ever walks up to me when I'm in that booth and says, what is this or what's going on, or just wants general information.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And the show, what's ironic is in the past, I'll get someone will call up and say, hey, I met you at a truck show, Louisville, Dallas, wherever. I go on your booklets. Is this part still this price? I'm like, oh, God, no, that's 4 years old. He goes, yeah, I showed 4 years ago. And they kept the booklet.
Right, right.
Which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's a good sign. That's a good sign. All right.
Let's face it.
You got anything else this week?
Not everyone needs something today. If you're in trucking and your truck's fine, you might not need it when you're at the show today. But you might need a part a year from now, 2 years from now. And we get a lot of that, business from previous shows.
Yeah, that's a good point. And as long as you guys have been on the air, and Bruce has been writing articles for how long? It's been a long time.
Yeah, 15, 20 years, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
I lose track.
Yeah, I do too. I know I used to write quite a bit, and boy, I hate writing. I talk much better than I write. And actually, Overdrive has actually asked me to come back and do another financial column, and I haven't given him an answer yet. It just always felt like so much pressure to me. I know it's not that long. It's usually 600 to 1,000 words a month, and I can normally knock that out in an hour. But I swear I try to put it off for 40 hours and then finally sit down and do it. And I don't know. I just not sure if I'm ready to take that on again.
A lot of work.
It is. It is. Bruce is good at it, though. I mean, Bruce has been doing it a long time, and he sits down and he gets them done. And that, people have been reading those articles for years. So it's a different event in the Pittsburgh Power booth at a truck show. Oh,
sure is.
Looks like Angie just talked to Bruce. He should be calling any second. So we'll bring Ethan in, and Bruce should be up next. We've got some calls already, so we need to get to those here in a little bit. Ethan, welcome.
As always, Kevin, good to be here.
You sound like you're right next to me, but you're really right next to Pete, right?
Yep. This is a new setup, some new technology. Looking forward to playing with it there.
You sound really good. Those headsets and that board sound good in there. I got it put together just under the wire. Like I was I would have ran back out here to the coach, but I probably would have been laying in the parking lot coughing if I would have tried that. So, but we were down to the minute. Hey, somebody's got to tell Bruce he needs a new computer. His is still a Pentium. I almost forgot what that word was.
Yeah, I was going to mention that, the technology issue we had there at last minute, and, one of those little technological hurdles to overcome. And good news, we had a spare laptop around, so we could quickly get it up and running.
Yeah, that's for sure. It looked like Bruce's computer had about 2 weeks worth of update. Actually, it was a year worth of updates. It just looked like it was going to take 2 weeks for him to complete. And I couldn't get the driver installed, and I could go on and on. But we got it. We're all here. We're talking. I don't see Bruce coming in yet. So what's new and exciting in your world?
Oh, just the normal. Trying to fix trucks, get them going. So nothing too out of the ordinary.
Got it. Busy?
As always. Doesn't change too often there for us. Either, even when we get a little time off, then there's always a little bit of R&D. You got an idea to play with, do a little research, try to figure stuff out. Some of those little side projects that you wanted to look into and say, hey, I wonder if this is possible. And sometimes it is, and sometimes you shoot your own idea down in a couple minutes.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, I was going to do an update on the industry today, but we've got a lot of calls coming in already. I want to make sure we get to calls, but all signs are pointing to probably a rough year or two. I think we're probably looking at some of the conditions we saw in like 9, 10, and 11. Maybe even worse this time. It's hard to say. Too many other things going on. The war in Ukraine, inflation, fuel prices, so many things kind of out of control, but every indicator that I'm looking at right now in the industry is not good. Rates are dropping, freight's drying up. I think we're in for an interesting time.
Yeah, and it's not just the trucking. I think it's everywhere at the moment. So
Exactly.
we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always going to be trucks. People are always going to deliver freight. We just want to make sure we're helping the people that are doing it. All right, it looks like we do have Bruce in, so I'm going to welcome Bruce. Bruce, welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you today?
Good. You threw me a curve with the 11 a.m. start.
Yeah, I know. I'm not very consistent on all this stuff yet. I thought I was going to do an hour first myself and then go into the power hour, but my voice is starting to give out again, so I wasn't sure if I could make it that first hour by myself, so I figured I'd bring you guys in instead.
Did you see the 1966 Peterbilt for sale that needs painted for $150,000?
No. And it needs painted?
Needs painted. Actually, it's got good bones, just needs painted. The guy has a lot of newer stuff on it.
What year is this?
Wow. 1966.
A 66. Wow.
Mm-hmm. What was that called? A 251 or something back then?
I have no idea.
Anyway. Here's a question. David Keller sent me a question on Messenger. Why, when they measure the wheelbase on a tandem truck, do they measure to the center of the tandems instead of the center of the rear axle? And I always wondered that too. Do you have any idea why?
I have a guess, but I don't know if this is correct or not. I think that's kind of ends up being the pivot point. I think. So
when you're turning a sharp curve, you're...
Yeah, I think if you had a single axle, it pivots right in the center of that axle. But with a tandem, I think they measure to the center of the two tandems because that's more accurate of where it's going to pivot from, I think. I don't know where that even came from, though.
Okay. And did they get the Safety Plus on your motorhome?
No. We should talk about that right now because everybody's here. Pete?
Yes.
What do we need?
We can do it. We need to get in the building.
What's that?
We just need to get you in the building.
Okay. Well, I guess I will. I'll close it up if you've got an open bay, and we'll put it in the building after the show today.
We can do that.
All right. That sounds good. So, Bruce, in case you joined us late, Pete and Ethan are in your office, and they're actually running the show.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So did we get the new equipment?
I did, and it actually worked out good. I think I screwed this up. I think I asked you about buying the board and the headsets. You and I talked about that, didn't we?
No, you told me all the equipment. You gave me an exact price. So just get it.
Yeah, that I ran it by you just to get it approved, and I think you said, yeah, just have Pete get it. And then in my mind, I thought I was done, but I never told Pete. So this morning, I was setting up a new board for myself, and I thought, well, I have a board and two headsets. I'll just give this to Pete if they hadn't ordered theirs yet. Luckily, I hadn't said anything to him like I was supposed to, so he didn't, and it worked out perfect. So now you've got a board, two really good headsets. We could get you a third in case all three of you are ever in there at one time. Probably will be. So I think we just need
we'll need three because I fly back tomorrow. If we can get out of Denver, they're having 80-mile-an-hour winds today. It was rough sleeping up here in the mountains last night. Very windy. So anyway.
Got it. Well,
other than that, everything's good. Everything's good.
I just realized I have another one of those headsets with me. So I'll take this in the building. You guys will be all set. You'll have the board, 3 headsets, and with a little bit of training, you guys will be able to start and run a show anytime you want.
Okay. And on truck stuff, Pete and I are getting a tremendous amount of calls on big cams. I had a fellow yesterday bought a 1986 cab over Volvo, I think it was, with a big cam in it. And he is not mechanically inclined, just starting out to be an owner-operator. And, we're losing mechanics in this industry. And if you can't work on your own truck, you're going to need to learn to do some things, some of the minor things. But this guy didn't even want to attempt putting in a turbo boost gauge, and that's about as basic as it comes. So I warned him. I said, you're going to get to the point where you can make all the money in the world. If you can't get into a shop, you're not going to get in, and you're going to need to fix it yourself. The other one is okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm getting behind. I've got two questions for you. One, I just thought about that Pete. What engine is in that thing?
The 1966.
Yeah.
I forget what's in it.
Okay.
It's got updated rears and suspension and things. The truck looks good other than the paint. Nice skinny windshield, skinny hood, Pete. I just brought that up because of look at where the prices are going.
Oh, I don't think that's going to last much longer. Rates are just tanking. Rates are coming down every week, and a lot of people don't realize it because when the fuel was going up, that makes the rate go up even without the fuel surcharge. But the base rate itself, I think we're down almost 60 cents a mile since January. They're down a lot.
Wow.
Yeah, I think we're going to start feeling that. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention there, what you just mentioned about not being able to get into a shop and you should have the ability to do some of your own work, the hydraulic line that ruptured on the coach, nobody would do it. I could not get anybody to work on it. I spent the whole morning on the phone. The RV guys said there's no way they would work on that without it being in the shop up on a lift. I went through all of those. Nobody would come out work on it. Went through a couple truck guys. They didn't even want to talk about it because it was an RV. Finally got the one truck guy to come out. He crawled under there, and I said, it's going to be up in this area somewhere. He's like, we can't work on that out here. And then I said, well, how close is your shop? I was thinking if nobody's going to work on this thing out here, maybe I do have to get it in. And he's like, oh, wait, you don't want to take it to our shop anyway. All of our mechanics suck. So, I'm thinking, well, there's a real vote of confidence.
What happened to desire and determination? Years ago, I got called to a cab over Kenworth, needed an air compressor with a big cam in it. But they couldn't bring it to the shop. It was 6 miles away on a street in New Kensington, PA, which used to be the home of Alcoa Aluminum. And I get there, and the reason they wouldn't bring it in is because the cab jack was broken. Good thing I wasn't large, and I squeezed between the tire and up underneath and the bumper, took the fuel pump off. All I had to drain the coolant, took the fuel pump off, took the air compressor off, and I changed that air compressor with that cab being down. Because I just had this thing in me that I never wanted to be defeated by something mechanical.
That you've been through that, you've done work outside, years, decades of that. I was just, it just seems like it's getting harder and harder to get anything worked on. And when the one guy came out and said, oh, no, I can't work on that. Luckily, I had some other things, and I said, look, go work on those. Let me see if I can find the leak. So I got under there and found it. Once I found it and pointed it out to him, then I got him kind of interested, and he at least helped, and he had more tools there, so we did manage to get it fixed. But that was an entire day of just trying to track somebody down and find somebody, and then ultimately ending up having to at least troubleshoot it myself and saying, here's what's wrong. Can you fix this?
That's right. You found it. You found the leak. And you lost the day of the Louisville show. You lost Thursday at Louisville.
I did. But my thought was, if I didn't do it on that Thursday, my next shot would have been Sunday, which I wouldn't have gotten anything done. Then, wake up and when something's wrong, it's all I'll think about. So if I would have gone to the show on Thursday, all I would have thought about is the truck, the coach isn't running, and I got to fix it. And I don't even have a plan. Had I called somebody and they said, hey, look, we could get out there, first thing Friday or whatever. But I couldn't get anybody to even commit to it. And that just seems to be getting worse all the time.
So it's a good thing you're mechanically inclined. And for those of you who aren't, it starts with one bolt at a time.
That's it.
And you take out the one bolt and you take out the next and the next. And next thing you know, you have the part off or the line off. But I also wanted to say, and Pete's been saying this every week, the amount of phone calls we get on big cams is pretty staggering, but there's too many people mismatching parts. And people think it's a big cam, everything will work, and that is not true. Before you go letting another shop or doing it yourself and you're listening to your buddy down the street, you should give us a call and let's talk about your project and what you're doing, and we'll get you the right parts. Because it makes it pretty tough when the camshaft's in there and you don't know which cam it is.
It seemed like we went through that with the Series 60 for a while when they were building so many gliders and engines were short and parts were short. I had two trucks that I really tried to figure out why they were getting such poor fuel economy, and we went over them and over them and over them, and I just couldn't figure it out. And I said that you can always figure it out. I mean, if you spend enough time, you can always figure out why something isn't getting the fuel economy you expect. But it turned out that I had kind of given up on them. I had nowhere else to go. I didn't know what else to do. And I was in touch with both of the dealers that had the trucks in there. And it turns out they were put together with the wrong parts.
Yeah. Yes, that can happen.
It was a tough one to figure out.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right. Well, we've got calls, and I think we should take them. Let's get started in Massachusetts. Bob, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you. It's a 351 Peterbilt, probably a 335 Cummins. And the pivot point, the reason for the wheelbase is because the fifth wheel should be set between the axles or over the axle on a single axle.
Ah, got it. That would make sense.
The reason I knew that is because I'm looking at a 63 right now, thinking I want to put a 444 Cummins and 342 rears in it with 13.
That's a great choice right there.
Now you're talking Bruce's language.
It's set in the woods, Bruce, for $6,000.
Is that what it is, huh?
Yeah, I'm telling you, I'm dreaming, but I sure do want to build that truck. My double eagle sleeper would look real nice on the back of that.
I'm going to see if I can find that one on Facebook that I saw the other night.
Four States, the owner of Four States over there has a 66, and that is a sharp truck. I'm going to take that.
Brian, is that the truck Brian redid a long time ago?
Yeah, he bought that when he first started. He redid that one. He still got it.
Hey, here's Barney Fife. Here's Barney Fife says. I just saw a picture. Barney Fife says, having a CDL don't make you a truck driver, cupcake.
There you go. Back in the 80s, built a truck, Performance Truck Cabs built a truck called the Pegasus. Does anybody remember that truck? They only made 3 of them.
That somehow sounds familiar, but I don't remember it.
I got to see that truck at the 76 there in Kingman. Got to see the inside of it and everything. That was an awesome little truck. Look it up and see if that doesn't remind you of the new Tesla cab.
Really? Wow.
Every time I think of that truck, I think, man, I'd love to set that cab on a Volvo chassis with that high-performance motor.
That'd be interesting. I just, that name sounds really familiar, but I don't remember what it was.
Yeah, it was an awesome-looking little truck. It was back in the 80s, it was totally futuristic. It was way ahead of its time.
Huh.
The reason I really called, and I talked to the guys over at Pittsburgh Power, I stumped them, and I'm going to see if I can stump you. I've got a 12.7 Detroit and D-Deck 2. When I run my Jake brake, I build restriction on the air filter. And the other day I was talking to the guys at Pittsburgh Power. I was rolling off the east side of Laramie. No accelerator, rolling at 70, kicked on my Jakes, and I start building restriction in my air filter, and it builds it all the way up to 20 pounds of restriction. Now, over the day, it'll come back down, or if I get into a hard pull where I'm running, getting that pyrometer up there about between 500-600, and mine is after the turbo, and, get my temperatures up there where they should be, it'll come back down. Why would I be getting filter restrictions from the turbo? It shouldn't happen.
Well, you're making boost. So to make boost, did you say you were making 20 pound of boost?
No. I was on the boost with Jake on. I'm making about 15 pounds of boost at the time. But my filter restriction just kept climbing.
What kind of truck is it?
It's a 92 feet, 12.7 Detroit, D-Deck 2, 13-speed with 390 rears.
Dual air filters?
No. I still got the original cylinder air filter on it. That's the only thing I haven't changed. I've put the gear muffler on it, balancer, and it's got the tilt manifold, and that 702 turbo.
So if you have 15 pound of boost with the Jake on going downhill, what happens when you're going up a grade at 15 pound of boost? Do you have the same amount of restriction?
No. If I'm on a pull, the restriction doesn't build. It's when I turn the Jake brake on going downhill. Or I'm coasting down the hill and turn the Jake brake on.
Wow.
And nobody can tell me why that would do that. I mean, it shouldn't. There shouldn't be any air coming back to the air filter.
Where's the restriction gauge?
It is just past the air filter it's a rubber, not the rubber boot, but the metal cylinder there.
Right, okay.
Where the tube comes out the big tube comes out of the air filter to the turbo. Right. It's in that tube.
Well, you got to get air in because it takes turbo boost, but why do you have more restriction whenever the Jake's on than whenever you're pulling air for the turbo?
Exactly.
Good question.
And I mean, nobody can answer it. Everybody stumped on it. I told your wife I won't play stump the jump here. I thought maybe since you had so many Detroits, you might have run across it at some point.
I never had a truck with a restriction gauge in the cab that I could see. So I'm trying to think through that. That is just illogical. I mean, it doesn't even make sense.
Exactly.
If he made that kind of restriction under load, if he had 25 pounds of boost and 20 inches restriction pulling a hill, then okay, we've got an air filter issue. But he doesn't make that type of restriction under load. He just does it with the Jake one. I've never seen that happen. Never noticed that on a road test. Never had that complete before.
It's just when I'm coasting. And, oil temperature dropped down. It had dropped down about 150, because it was 34 degrees outside. So my water temperature staying up there about 180, 190. But my oil temperature dropped down about 150. It fluctuates between 150 and 200, depending on if I'm pulling or not. But when I'm on a long coast, especially if it's cool weather, I kick that Jake on, and she'll start building restriction. And like the other day, I had restriction all day long. And finally, later in the day, when I got into pulling, it would come back down to 0. Or if I stop the truck, turn it off, and start over, it'd come back to 0.
I never looked at my restriction gauge when I was going downhill with the Jake on in my 89 Kenworth, so I can't answer that one.
I just wonder if this is...
When I called it other days, the guys were like, well, if it's not affecting your performance, I wouldn't worry about it. But it is, because when it's restricting when I have that restriction, then I'm losing boost until it gets rid of that restriction.
So you can see that it does affect your boost.
Yes, my boost will, after that, if my boost restriction builds up like that, I'll drop back to 15 to 18 pounds of boost. And then once it drops back down, she'll jump right back up there to 27 pounds of boost.
So this is one of those things where you just have to start trying stuff, because I can't even think of anything logical. What would happen if when you get the restriction, you pulled over and just opened up the canister and pulled the air cleaner out and put it back in?
Well, I thought about that, and I was like, well, I don't want to do that with my truck running.
Well,
I've shut it down. Now, I've shut it down the other day. I did. Pulled it out just to check that filter. It's like, did they put a damaged filter in, or did I get a hole in the filter or something? And just make sure there wasn't something in that canister. And, it's still, the filter's a week old, and it's a brand new filter. No damage to it.
So when you put it back in and you started up, did you still have that same amount of restriction?
No, the restriction had dropped.
And all you did was turn it off and take the filter out. You didn't have to wait all day for it to go down.
No, yeah, that's the thing. If I'll stop and shut her down, then when I start her back up, it's periodical. I mean, every once in a while I'll have a little bit of restriction, and then it drop back down, but most of the time it'll drop it right back down.
I remember I have a thought. Years ago, they made some rubber elbows that didn't have the ribs on the outside, and those rubber elbows would suck shut.
Yep, the guys mentioned that, and the hoses are stiff. They're the rib type.
Okay.
And I'd even duct taped all my boots to make sure. Yeah, it's like, okay, they're in good shape, but I'm going to duct tape them boogers just to see if that makes a difference. And it didn't.
So this is odd. It's obviously not filter restriction, because the filter itself can't be restricted and then not restricted. I mean, once it's restricted,
I'll be something hell slow.
Boy, I am stumped. I have no idea.
I was hoping you would have a clue.
Not right. Here's the other thing. Like I said, I've never had a truck with a restriction gauge in the dash, so I've never known what happened when the Jake was on. But I just wonder if it is so odd to all of us. We've never heard of it. We've never talked. How many trucks do have restriction gauges inside? It's not that common.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure we'll get somebody that calls us and tells us.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. If
performance, though, because the boost gauge, you're not getting your boost when you have that restriction. Right, man? I'm not having full boost or full pedal.
So if you're coming down a hill and you have 15 inches of restriction on the air filter, with the Jake on, you get down into the dip and you start to roll back into the throttle. You're not getting your boost, correct?
I'm not getting the boost back up. She'll come up to 12, 15 pounds of boost, and then she'll stop.
Man, that's weird.
Yeah, Did this do this with the old filter, or once you change filters?
There's new fuel filters on it. I've just changed them. That's the first thing I do if I start losing power or anything is switch them filters out. That's step one.
Yeah, but before you said you just changed this air filter. Did it do this with the old air filter?
Yeah, it's been doing it. I've had the truck now for a year and a half, and it's been doing it.
Okay, so the filter had no effect on it, changing it?
Yeah. No, I just changed the air filters just to make sure that, I got
right. Well, yeah, that's a valid test.
But it's a problem that I've had with the truck. The truck was rebuilt at $2 million, and I've got about $242,000 on it now in the last year and a half. I only run about 80,000 miles a year.
So when you're pulling a hill, foot to the floor, you're really working it. What's the most boost you see in normal conditions when it's running right?
27 pounds.
Okay. And then how much air restriction do you have at that point?
At that point, I don't have restriction. It'll be a 0.
Which makes sense. I mean, that's...
maybe.
Right.
Right.
And that, the wrench in the works is...
I've got full boost. But once that restriction, if you got that restriction in there, then I'm, like Bruce said, when I'm rolling in and I get into the next hill, she's dead at about 15 pounds of boost until it gets that restriction down and my barometer gets up there about 600, and then she'll kick in. I'll catch a couple gears, and then you can feel it. The boost will come right back up and start climbing up to 27 again.
So this is going to be really odd, and I know we don't even talk about this on a diesel engine, but I'm home.
Come up Laramie 30 mile an hour with only 15,000 pounds on.
I'm trying to think, could this be some kind of, I hate to even use this term, vapor lock?
Well, I hear what you're saying.
I know it doesn't happen on a diesel. It doesn't really happen on cars anymore either, but it almost sounds like we're building it's not the filter restricted. It can't be. So it almost sounds like we're building pressure somewhere that takes time to release. But that doesn't make any sense.
I even wonder if it was maybe a fuel issue where I'm not getting enough fuel until it gets to a certain temperature.
I don't know. This is a weird one.
Have you ever verified you have the correct jakes for this engine?
As far as I know. They're the ones they put in it. It should be the original.
Okay. Yes.
So, Pete, let's say they're wrong jakes. Where are you going with this?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, but, I mean, that's something, again, we start checking things that might be random, and we want to check the easy things. So let's verify the jakes are correct. Let's verify they're set properly. There's sort of valve overlap going on.
So, yeah, that's maybe that's kind of where my head's going. So when the jakes are activated, there should be 0 fuel going through the injector, correct?
Yes.
Yes. 0 fuel.
What if there was fuel?
It would make a really odd sound.
Probably smoke.
And a lot of smoke.
I don't get the smoke. The only time I get smoke is a little white puff when I start her. A big white puff that's cold, but then it clears up.
Yeah. On a mechanical engine, you have fuel, but it's only the amount of fuel at idle going in when the jake's on. On an electronic engine, there shouldn't be any going on. Going in, I should say.
Yeah. I don't know.
Years ago, I found an air filter housing, and it had a separate plate so that whenever the turbo was drawing air and you had the 5 or 6 inch hole going into the air filter, there was a plate in there to make the air come from around the air filter. You don't have a plate like that in there, do you, in your air filter?
You know what? I think I think I might, because when you pull that filter out and you look in there, you don't just look into a hole, you look into a backing plate.
That backing plate was loose on this truck, and we'd go for a ride and we'd have come and go smoke and no power, and that plate was loose.
I could take off that intake hose and look in there and check that plate.
Well, other than that, I think we're going to have to throw this one out to the audience because you've stumped us all.
You're not the only one. I've stumped everybody from coast to coast.
Check the plate.
It's something.
And by the way, I found that 1966 Peterbilt.
Did you find it? It's an awesome looking truck, isn't it? He's going to finish.
It is. It's a good looking truck. I mean, it's got all the right stuff on it. All it needs is painted. It's got 255-inch wheelbase, low pro 22.5s, low air with 355 gear ratio, 14.613, 30,000 on the in frame with a big cam 400 Cummins. So it's a 351A, and it's at Grumpy's Truck Sales and Parts. I have no idea where that is, but
that's the one they want 100.
Oh, it's got a 30-inch Mercury bunk on it that they said just rebuilt, and it's an original Mercury.
Wow.
So,
all right, Bob,
there you go.
We're going to cut you loose. I'm looking at the calls and I'm looking at the time, and we have got to get a move on here. We're going to head off to Ohio. David, welcome to the program.
Hello. Can you hear me?
I can, and it looks like we're looking at an oil sample, correct?
Yeah, it's on a 2000 W9 with a C12, 575,000 miles.
So, it looks like you turned your kids loose with a box of crayons on this thing. What the hell is going on here?
I started losing antifreeze, and I couldn't figure out where it was going, so I ran the oil sample. It had 7,200 miles on it, and that was in 2020. It didn't come back with antifreeze in, but it came back with fuel dilution. So I took it to my local shop, and they said I had one injector leaking, so they replaced that. Then I ran it another 7,000 miles with another oil sample, and the fuel dilution went down a little, but not much. But then I had antifreeze in there.
Well,
so I can't figure out what's going on.
I'm not sure you ever had coolant. You had sodium, but no potassium.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually not coolant. If it's coolant, we see both. And you have, like, no potassium. This is, you've had just some really strange stuff here. What happened? The silicon was up to 20. Oh, they must have had they put in the injector then. Okay. Yeah, the copper we could ignore. Just ignore the copper completely. I think. How long have you owned this truck?
12 years.
So you've never seen lead before, right, on a sample?
No.
Okay.
It's a farm truck that averages 9,000 miles a year.
Got it. That's going to screw a lot of these readings up. The copper I would ignore. It's coming out of the oil cooler. The fuel dilution is down to 2.9.
But that was only on a 2,500 mile sample.
Right, which is part of the problem. We're not putting enough miles on these samples to know whether or not you may still have an injector issue. Honestly, here would be my advice. You run the thing 9,000 miles a year.
Right.
We'd have to wait a year and a half to get it. It's hard to tell on samples sometimes till we get about 15,000. Honestly, I think for right now, I would just change the oil twice a year.
That's what I've been doing.
Yeah, I don't know what else to tell you. We're just not going to be able to put enough miles on this thing to troubleshoot it with an oil sample, and the history is just all over the board. I mean, nothing makes sense. Where's all the sodium coming from since there's no potassium? The fuel dilution, at one point it was 8.7. I've heard that over 7%, the crankcase can explode. Never seen it happen, never heard about it happening, but I've read it. And I took some classes on oil analysis, and they said with 7% fuel dilution, there's enough fuel in there that you could actually combust it. The oil would be combusted.
We've had it happen. We had it happen on a cab over Kenworth, so I'll tell you about it.
Yeah, it's possible. I've just never seen it. Honestly, though, I don't know that we could figure this thing out unless you were able to put more miles on it in a shorter period of time.
I don't think I can do that. There's one other thing. At idle, it vibrates now, like the mirrors will rattle. I put new motor mounts on it. I put a new damper on it. Made no difference. So could that tell us there's something wrong with injectors?
Yeah. Yeah, you could still have a bad injector. Or more than one.
And the one place made no difference on the vibration either. But the truck runs fine.
If it's running fine, and it's a farm truck that you put 9,000 miles on, I think I'd just keep changing the oil twice a year.
Okay.
You know, if you keep sampling and you're seeing high fuel dilution in a short period of time, then you may want to decide, is it worth changing injectors or not?
Okay.
All right. That was boy, it's a weird day. We have got weird stuff going on here, but
let me tell you about this big, I think it was a Big Chem 1400 that blew the oil pan off, aluminum oil pan. He was stuck in a blizzard in Iowa. Back then we had some injector issues and cam follower issues. So he lost one. He drove it from Iowa back to Pittsburgh on 5 cylinders. And I'm trying to think of where he was, but he had an explosion. He was getting fuel in the oil. It blew the oil pan off. So he towed it on in. And there was 4 brothers all raised on a farm. Their last name was Kelly. They're only about 3 miles away from our shop now. And he had a wooden ramp going up into the barn. He started it with no oil pan on it and drove it into the barn. And I went up and pulled the rod and mains, and they were perfect.
Oh, man. That took guts. Holy cow.
So, on the way up, I was thinking, wow, this is going to be a disaster, but it wasn't.
Wow.
We put a new oil pan on it, fixed the injectors, and put her back to work.
Well, now I can say I at least know of a story where fuel dilution did cause it to explode. Like I said, I've read it. I've just never heard it really happening.
When the seal went bad on my 89 Dodge in the fuel pump, and I was in Breckenridge, Colorado in 1992, I had 50% dilution with fuel.
Wow.
And prior to that, I was going down to Salida to run the rapids, and I was driving 90 miles an hour in that pickup truck. The very next day, when I went to put the luggage in because we were leaving, I saw the fuel film on the back of the window of the cap. And I pulled the dipstick out, and I was 100% over.
Wow. Wow.
So the truck held 3 gallon. I drained 6 gallon out of it. In a parking lot, pulled the fuel pump, had to borrow a puller to get the gear off. And nobody knew me, so I had to leave. I forget how many $100 deposit, plus my driver's license. Borrowed another vehicle, went into Denver for $28. I think it was Moraney put a seal in it. Cummins wouldn't sell me a fuel pump because they didn't have one to match the CPL. I said, look, between the boost gauge and the exhaust gas temperature gauge, I don't care what your pump set out. I just need a pump. I have to get back east. They wouldn't sell me a pump. So there I was. I was in a parking lot just like you, Kevin, last week.
Yep.
Draining 6 gallon of oil out. And then I had to get rid of that. So, but you got to do what you got to do.
There you go. All right, we've got to get to a couple more calls here before we run out of time. We're off to Florida this time. Tim, welcome to the program.
Hey, Kevin, how's it going, buddy?
Good. What can we help you with today?
That's good. Hey, I was in Charlotte last Wednesday, and I took your advice because you said the first thing we should do is get a remote tune because the fuel prices are so high. Or get a tune done to your truck, no matter how you do it. But anyway, I went to DPF Alternative there in Charlotte, and I pulled in there at 7:30 in the morning, and the guy said, hold on a second, I don't remember his name. let me get my ritual going here, and I'll pull you up to the door. So he did that. He pulled me up to the door, and he pulled out this laptop that said Pittsburgh Power on it. And he said, we're going to hook this up, and we're going to call Pittsburgh Power, and you're going to talk to them. You're going to tell them what you want.
Okay.
I said, really? He said, really? So we called Pittsburgh Power. Kathy answered. Kathy transferred us to Ethan. And I talked to Ethan myself, and he told me where the truck was set. He did everything on the laptop right there from Pittsburgh Power. That guy at DPF Alternative, all he did was plug it in.
Right.
So I just want to try to understand, when you're taking your truck to a remote tuner, Pittsburgh Power is doing the tune. The remote tuners is hooking up the laptop and calling Pittsburgh Power and say, I got a truck here.
Yeah. Yeah, you're
you guys you're in good hands.
Yeah, good point. And I don't know that we've ever really made that clear before. But that Ethan, you want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, so it's something I've talked about a lot when I talk to people over the telephone, but if you get a remote tune, there's four of us here, the same group is going to be doing it remotely or in the shop. So it's not like you get somebody else if you go remotely versus if you're here in the shop. And it's pretty random on who you get. You know, if one person's busy, the next person takes it. So it's kind of like the first available, all depending on how busy the shop is and what's going on at that particular time. But yeah, so you don't get a different tune if you get it done remotely versus in-house. The only difference here is if we do it here at Pittsburgh Power, you know, we do a dyno run with it
Right.
because we have the dyno physically located here. It doesn't move very well.
Very good. All right. Great stuff.
So I'm sure, can I just say one more thing before you go?
Sure.
Because they're thinking, you know, we got them all thinking now. They're listening. So before we had 500 horses, 16. Now I got 600 horses. Ethan says around 2,000 torque, and it's there. A fuel pellet relay on it, and away we go.
There you go.
But I'm going to start doing. I'm doing oil samples, but I can't tell you. I've done a bunch of empty moves, so I'm at 11.69 on fuel on your app, but I can't. It's only one trip, so let me get some fuel. Try some fuel mileage for 30 days, and we'll see where we're at. I'll call you back.
Sounds good. I will look forward to it. All right, we are going to take one more call. We're going to go to Indiana. Jack, we are within 2 minutes of the top of the hour, so as we get closer to the top, I may have to interrupt you. I'll close out this first hour, but we will finish your call. It's going to be the last call of the day. Let's go ahead and get started on it. Jack?
Hey, Kevin, how you doing?
Good. What's on your mind today?
Well, I purchased a 1986 Winnebago Jeep 22-foot RV. It's got a 454 engine in it.
Okay.
And I drove from Las Cruces, New Mexico to Florida, 1,600 miles, and it ran great. It's only got 37,000 miles on it. And I'm wondering if I could get better fuel mileage by going with throttle body fuel injection.
Oh, I have no idea. I was going to say if you want to get better fuel economy, yank that thing out of there and put a diesel in it, and then we could help you. I know nothing about getting better fuel economy out of gas engines, believe it or not. I know next to nothing. Anybody have any ideas?
Well, you can look at the exhaust system first and see if it's got restrictive mufflers, see if it's got one pipe versus two. You could look at the air intake system and see if the air filter is restricted and where it's getting its air from. Those are the first two things. The third thing is you take the distributor out and you take it to a good speed shop and tell them what you're doing with it. Tell them you want it to pull like a raped ape, not a scalded dog. Scalded dog is for race car.
All right, Bruce, I had to mute you there because I got to wrap up this hour. We will be back here tomorrow for Destination Health. We will see you then.